David Thompson's surprise homecoming. David Thompson, CEO of Thompson Tech, had just returned home from an exhausting 3-week business trip in Japan. His flight was long, the time zones had him disoriented, and the entire trip was all about securing the biggest acquisition in the history of his company. An $8 billion deal had just closed, but today he wasn't thinking about profits or corporate growth. He wasn't even thinking about the hard work it took to turn Thompson Tech from a Silicon Valley startup into an empire. What occupied his thoughts was Ruth Williams. She was 67 now, but to David, she would always be the woman who saved him. Ruth wasn't his biological mother. She didn't even have the luxury of being a young, vibrant mother when she took him in from the adoption system. But she was his mother, and she had been the only mother who truly mattered. When David was 9, the adoption system placed him in Ruth's care. Ruth was a retired nurse, living in a modest home on the south side of Chicago. Her pension barely covered her living expenses, but despite her financial situation, Ruth worked extra shifts at 2 hospitals. So David could go to school and get the programming classes he dreamed of taking. It was Ruth who taught him how to be strong when the world seemed to have no place for him. As David turned the wheel of his electric Mercedes, gliding silently through the circular driveway of their Malibu mansion, he smiled to himself. This was going to be a surprise for Ruth. A quiet celebration of everything she had done for him. He had plans to make her favorite tea Earl Grey with honey, just like the way she had always made it for him when he was a child. David had learned to appreciate this little ritual, especially after coming home from school upset over the cruel comments he'd faced from others about his family. Ruth had always known how to comfort him. The house was quiet as David parked the car and walked toward the side entrance. His heart warmed at the thought of Ruth sitting at the kitchen table, ready to sip the tea he would make her. It was a small gesture, but David knew she'd love it. But as he reached the entrance, something made him stop. A sound. Voices. His wife Isabella's voice, unmistakable, cutting through the air like a sharp blade. "I told you not to use the front entrance when I have guests." Isabella's voice was harsh. "What kind of impression do you think this gives my clients' wives?" David felt his chest tighten as he paused. His instincts told him to retreat, to not hear any more, but curiosity and a growing unease pulled him closer. Ruth's response was meek, broken. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Isabella. I just wanted to." "I don't care what you wanted," Isabella snapped. "You're the maid here, not the queen of the house, just because my husband has this strange obsession with you." David felt the blood drain from his face, his body frozen. "Maid." The word echoed in his mind. Ruth had been a mother to him, not a maid. She had raised him with love, sacrifice, and the kind of care that no one else had ever given him. And now, his wife was reducing her to nothing more than an employee, unworthy of any respect. David's deep bond with Ruth. David Thompson stood frozen in the shadow of the marble column, his heart pounding. The cruel words he had just overheard echoed in his mind like a bad dream. Isabella, his wife of 12 years, had never shown such blatant disrespect toward Ruth before, not in front of him at least. He had always believed Isabella's charming smile and kind words were genuine, especially when it came to Ruth. But hearing this, David realized how wrong he had been. Ruth, who had taken David in when no one else wanted him, who had given him everything, her love, her time, her strength, was being humiliated in the place that was supposed to be her home. For years, Ruth had been his only family, and now, David was watching his wife strip away her dignity with every cruel remark. He felt a wave of guilt and anger flood through him. It wasn't just that Ruth had raised him, given him the confidence to chase his dreams, and supported him when he needed it most. Ruth had done all this while sacrificing so much of her own life. She hadn't just been a mother, she had been a rock in a world that was constantly shifting beneath his feet. Ruth had been a nurse, dedicated to helping others, but she was also dedicated to helping him, giving him a chance to succeed when the odds were stacked against him. David remembered the day he first arrived at Ruth's home. He had been 9, confused, angry, and feeling abandoned. He remembered her soft voice, her kind touch as she held his hand and led him into a home that, despite being small, felt warm. Ruth was a retired nurse living on a pension, but she never let David feel like he was a burden. Instead, she worked extra shifts to pay for his education. When David had expressed an interest in computers, Ruth hadn't hesitated. She sacrificed her own comfort to ensure he had access to the best resources possible, even if it meant working herself to the bone. She believed in him, and in turn, David believed in himself. That belief had turned a small, broken boy into a CEO of an $8 billion company. But now, he was seeing the same woman who had poured her love and energy into him being torn apart by the person who was supposed to be his partner in life. David couldn't believe what he was hearing. Ruth, who had been his guiding star, was being called a maid, a servant, a nobody. David's thoughts were interrupted by Isabella's voice again, this time cutting through his haze of disbelief. "I'm not a maid." Ruth's voice, though soft, held a tone of dignity that David had never heard before in such a painful moment. "David invited me to live here as family." Isabella's laugh echoed coldly through the kitchen, mocking Ruth's words. "Family?" she scoffed. "A black woman from Chicago who picked up a boy from an institution when no one else wanted him. Please. You were paid by the state to take care of him, just like any nanny." The weight of Isabella's words crashed down on David. Ruth had never, ever mentioned receiving financial help from the state. To David, Ruth had never been anything but a mother, his mother. She had never looked at him with pity, nor had she ever accepted charity. She had made her sacrifices freely without expecting anything in return. Yet here was Isabella, completely dismissing Ruth's love and hard work. David's blood boiled and his mind raced with questions. How could Isabella speak to Ruth like this? How could she strip away the very essence of the woman who had given him everything? Was this the person he had married? Someone so consumed by privilege and entitlement that she couldn't see the humanity of the woman who had made their life possible? The sound of Ruth's soft sobs reached David's ears and his heart clenched. Ruth had always been so strong, but now she was reduced to this broken shell, trapped in a house she had helped build with her sacrifices, now being treated like an outsider. Tension at home, Isabella's cruelty. David could feel the anger rising in him, but he held back, quietly watching as Isabella continued to tear down Ruth with every word. He wanted to confront his wife right there, but he knew this wasn't just about a momentary outburst, it was about years of unchecked cruelty. Isabella's harsh laughter echoed through the kitchen. "You're not a maid?" she repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You were paid by the state to take care of him, Ruth. Don't try to act like you're some kind of saint. You were just doing your job." Ruth, with all her grace and dignity, didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke volumes, and it was more painful than anything she could have said. She had been there for David, without question, without hesitation. She had been the constant when everything else seemed uncertain. David's chest tightened as he thought about how much Ruth had sacrificed. When he was growing up, it wasn't just about providing him with basic needs, food, shelter, clothing. Ruth had done so much more. She had given him love, guidance, and most importantly, belief in himself. She had taught him the value of hard work, and she had done it all while living with less than she deserved. Her strength and character had shaped him into the person he was today, and to see her being treated like this, like she was nothing more than a hired help, shattered him. But Isabella wasn't finished. "And another thing," she added, her voice cold and matter-of-fact, "stop leaving your hair in the drain of the bathroom you use. It's disgusting. Starting today, you'll use the bathroom in the basement storage room. The basement bathroom doesn't have heating, but I'm sure that's a lesson you need. You're not a guest here. You're tolerated." David's eyes widened in disbelief. His wife's cruelty knew no bounds. Ruth had worked tirelessly to ensure David had every opportunity he could ever need, and now she was being treated like a nuisance. The woman who had given him everything was being forced into the coldest, most uncomfortable part of their home, as if she didn't belong. The sting of humiliation burned through David's veins, but he stood still, unable to find the words to confront his wife in that moment. The air was thick with tension. David could barely breathe, but his thoughts were sharp, clear. How had he missed this? How had he not seen Isabella's true nature sooner? The woman he had married, the woman he had trusted with his life and the life of the person who had saved him, was capable of such cruelty. Ruth, ever the survivor, didn't argue. She simply nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she set down the cup of tea she had been holding. It was as if she had given up fighting for her dignity in that moment, because, after all, what was the point when the person who was supposed to protect you was the one causing the pain? David stepped back, retreating into the garden as the sounds of the confrontation continued inside. His heart was heavy and his mind raced. How could he fix this? How could he make this right for Ruth? A memory came rushing back, one of those rare moments in life that defined who you were. It was Ruth at 35, working 3 jobs to support him so he could attend his first programming competition. She had been exhausted, her hands calloused, but she still found the energy to reassure him. "Baby, one day you're going to be so big that you'll help people like us. But never, ever let anyone make you forget where you came from." Now, David stood in his garden, watching the sun set, feeling the weight of Ruth's sacrifices pressing down on him. She had taught him everything. And now, it was time for him to do what she had always done for him, protect her, no matter the cost. David pulled out his phone and opened the mansion's security app, his finger hovering over the screen. If Isabella was capable of treating Ruth like this while he was home, how much worse had it been while he was away for weeks? If you found this story moving, don't forget to subscribe and hit the comment section below. Share your thoughts on the video, and let me know what you think David should do next in this heartbreaking situation.